And we're live. G'day, I'm Scotty North, and this is Zenium Live, where we talk all things money, finance, and property. And thank you for everyone who's watching live, and of course listening to us on our Zenium Live podcast, which is available at all the good podcast spots and locations, and wherever you get your good podcast from. Make sure you look us up, Zenium Live there. All right, on today's show. Well, it's a big one. In fact, it's that big I had to rearrange the screen, right, just to fit everyone on here. So let's see if we can get them on here. Today we have the one and the only, the man who is always visiting us, and we'll have to talk about that shortly. The trumpet of truth and the renegade of research from hotspotting.com.au. We have Terry Ryder. How are you going, Terry?
I'm very fine. I thought I was the oracle of information.
That was last show, mate. That's last show. You can't keep up to date. All right, we've also got a couple of guys that are often referred to as the Bonnie and Clyde of the building and construction industry. We have from Pivotal Homes, Tom, Egan, and Hayden Ashton. How you going, fellas?
Good, mate. Good. Yeah, thanks for having us. Very excited to be in the presence of two men of such caliber. So very excited.
I think they're talking about you, Terry. I would be very low caliber.
Terry and Tom I was, and then there was Scotty.
He's definitely talking about me, but I'm wondering which one's Bonnie?
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. Which one is Bonnie?
I'll be whoever. I'm easy.
Okay. All right, that's good. Well, look, all jokes aside, serious topic. We've gone very Zoolander on our topic for the day, which is building is just so hot right now. And absolutely. I know that's one of Terry's favourite movies, and so he actually suggested that title. And so what I wanted to delve into with you guys was that as a builder, you know, what are you seeing on the ground? Because from the side that Terry sees in terms of research, the side that I see in terms of clients, we're thinking it's pretty busy. But do you want to tell us what, as an actual builder, what you're seeing, what's going on?
Yeah, absolutely. So you're spot on. I mean, it's certainly, I mean, in my almost a decade of experience, I've never seen it, I suppose, as hot in terms of the activity. I'm calling it an avalanche, I suppose, of owner-occupier inquiry that is just flooding the market and taking a heap of opportunity, or taking lots of opportunities out of the marketplace. So, you know, if we sort of look at where we were in terms of this year as a whole, it's been sort of a tale of almost 2 years. We early on in the coronavirus pandemic, a lot of I suppose anxiety, a lot of nerves, and maybe a lot of procrastination in terms of people holding off on decision making. But we fast forward, I think June 8th in relation to the home builder grant, and that almost changed the dynamic of the market overnight in terms of the owner occupiers just flooded into purchasing. And on the back of that, we're starting to see, a completely different market 6 months down the track in relation to investors as well, and being more confident. It certainly is a very, very exciting time in the marketplace, because there is just so much activity. And it's funny because we're in a recession technically, right? But I've never seen it so hot. So it's certainly interesting.
And that's a good point. And so, Tom, when I was talking to you earlier in the year, I mean, yep. When everyone's favourite virus hit this year, I mean, that you operated very differently. Your building company operated very differently to other builders. Do you want to tell us, why you did that and why that's part of what you do at Pivotal?
Yeah, sure. So I guess when coronavirus hit, we were, obviously unsure of the landscape and what was going to happen. We made a decision as a company to, I guess, stop taking on any new business to see, really to navigate through this, period that we were going through. Coming to the Home Builders Grant being released, we decided to come back into the market. But through that period, because we're, I guess, a cash-based business, we have no debt at all. We basically just stopped taking on new business, guaranteed the clients that we've got, and just finished their homes through construction. So we weren't really pushed to bring on new sales or, I guess, come up with new marketing incentives, put ourselves at risk by trying to incentivize clients to buy through that period. So we just try to guarantee the clients that we've already got.
Yeah, that's good. And so when did you guys realise, was it the homeowners grant, when it came out, did you go, okay, we're all full steam ahead, or was it driven by something else? And what's happened to investors? It's a two-pronged question, because this is where I wanted to bring Terry in on discussion.
Yeah, no, I suppose there wasn't a turning point in particular. I mean, when we look at March and where that landscape, I mean, all you had to do was turn on the news and see that people were losing their jobs, you know, by the thousands and thousands and thousands. So for us, it was, you know, with unsurety about lockdowns and uncertainty about supply of, you know, materials and supplies and whatnot from overseas. What we didn't want to find ourselves in a position was, you know, over promising and under delivering, I suppose. So as Tom explained, having the luxury and the financial position where a lot of people don't have, where we can take a sit back and really analyze it and be sure of the next move we make without having to do something under duress. And what we sort of, as I said, there wasn't sort of a catalyst to come back in, but what we became more and more comfortable with the lay of the land in relation to the response in relation to governing the virus pandemic, and we didn't feel like we were in any sort of trouble or threat in relation to finance or that's bank, you know, consumer finance I'm talking about, where clients can't complete their loans and whatnot. So we felt like that risk was almost gone. So we felt comfortable enough to start taking on new business. And as a result, I mean, it's worked out perfectly because the home builder grants come in at the same time or pretty much around the same time as we sort of entered the marketplace in. And that's sort of a market that really suits us, given, you know, our product type. But on the back of that, I mean, the consumer confidence, as I sort of mentioned, almost changed relatively overnight, and investors, you know, are starting to pour back in, particularly in southeast Queensland, because I think they've sort of seen seen how we've performed, and property prices have sort of maintained themselves, and everything's just ticking along nicely. Another day in paradise, as I say.
Yeah, that's a good point. So, Terry, when you're doing your research, and I know you're doing a lot of that in the COVID time, these areas that you have termed, and we talked about it in our last show, the exodus to affordable lifestyle. I mean, that's really come to the front foot at this point in time. How do you see? Does any of your data show the excess availability of land that was around in COVID that's not there now, or is it too early to sort of bring those stats in?
Probably a little bit early. You know, quite often the statistics are behind the game, and that's one of the problems that real estate consumers have trying to figure out what's going on. The statistics take time to come through, and when they do come through, they're backward looking. So at hotspotting, we're always looking for forward-looking indicators, and we're also really interested in anecdotal evidence. I think media keeps telling us what's happened in the last 12 months. We're talking to people at the coalface every day, right around the country, and what Hayden just said about an avalanche of owner-occupier activity sounds a bit like a marketing spiel, but in actual fact, it's the reality for most locations in Australia right now. We're getting messages like that from buyers agents and valuers and other real estate professionals all over the country. This market's incredibly competitive, but it's very much driven by owner-occupiers and first home buyers. Investors are still largely sort of sitting on the sidelines, waiting to see what happens, and they're missing opportunities, I think, because you know, stock is selling incredibly quickly in good locations, including in good regional areas in Australia, and it's actually a great time to be a landlord because vacancies are so low and rents are rising in most parts of Australia. But investors are kind of just sort of sitting it out, racked with uncertainty and missing opportunities.
Yeah, look, I'd definitely agree with that comment. That's what we've seen as well in regards to the investors. What I'm going to ask us here, the four of us, and we see each sort of section differently, especially the three sections, I guess, building, and then what I do and what Terry does, is the grant from the government the main reason why we're seeing this building boost, or would it have happened anyway even without the grant? Has anyone got any comments on that?
Look, I think it's probably just escalated things. I mean, for Queensland in particular, if you look at property prices in relation to the affordability of other states, the $25,000 home builder grant in Victoria or in Sydney or in Melbourne, is not like it is obviously great. 25 grand, 25 grand, but in Queensland, you're talking 5% of your purchase price almost. So you're talking a fair chunk of dough in comparison to the actual property price itself. So in Queensland in particular, you couple that with the $15,000 first homeowners grant, which is already on the table, and the stamp duty concessions and the LMI scheme from the federal government. I think Queensland's really was always in a very, very, very good spot to navigate through this uncertain time based off just housing affordability and the fact that $15,000 state federal grant is still a very good incentive on its own merit in accordance with the the affordability of the house prices. So I think it may not have been as busy as maybe not to the full effect, but there certainly would have been still a volume of transactions occurring because on the back of everyone it's in our Australian fabric, isn't it, DNA, that everyone wants to be a homeowner and not pay rent.
Yeah, that's a good point.
I think
sorry, you go, mate.
Yeah, it was definitely first-home buyers have been active for quite some time. They've just become more active because there's three things in their favour right now. One, interest rates have never been lower. Two, the level of government assistance has never been higher. And three, they're not competing so much with investors at the moment because, as we said earlier, investors are sitting on the sidelines to a certain extent. So everything's in the favour of first-home buyers as a cohort at the moment. They're incredibly active, but they were active previously. And it's the same with the exodus to affordable lifestyle trend. Media's characterised it as something that's being created by the pandemic and the lockdown. In actual fact, it's been underway for a number of years. It's just that it's been enhanced and kind of turbocharged by that pandemic period, which has opened the eyes of more people to the possibility of working from home using technology and therefore not needing to be in the big, expensive, congested cities so much and moving to lifestyle locations like the Sunshine Coast.
And investors are also, missing out if they do choose to buy now, because due to there's not much supply on the land, developers are hand-picking which applications do they take. Do they want to accept an EOI from an investor or a first home buyer? They actually will pick the first home buyer or an occupier that wants to buy on the estate. So the investors are actually missing out that are trying to enter the market as well.
So why are they doing that though, Tom? Like, why would they pick a homeowner over an investor?
Well, normally the owner-occupier or first home buyer is actually going to spend more on the property and also maintain that property, and on top of that, it's not going to put a supply of renters in that location as well. So it's better for the developer to do so, in my opinion, anyway.
Yeah. Okay. So that's a good point, because that was my next topic, and the next question for us all is, okay, if the grant turns off, or when it turns off, because unless it goes forever, right? It's going to end at the end of December, or they're going to extend it, or whatever it's going to happen. But at some point, it will disappear.
Yeah.
Then what? Like, Terry's already mentioned that there's such a extremely low number of vacancies in any of these areas. Rentals are hard to get. There's stories about people trying to fight with 15 others at an open home to go through for a rental, this sort of thing. Are we seeing a transition? This is a two-part question, one for Terry, one for you guys. Are we seeing a transition, Terry, from people who are renting to owning, and therefore the building will sort of peter off? Or is it going to keep going because we need to there is still a genuine underlying demand, and therefore we need more physical homes to house people? Where's it going to go?
Yeah, I think it's important to remember that the home builder grant's not the only show in town. There's a lot of other incentives there for first home buyers and other types of owner-occupier buyers as well. At a federal level and at a state government level, when you add it all up, as I said earlier, there's never been a better time to be, particularly a first home buyer. But it's not all about the home builder grant. I think I think we've been underbuilding in Australia for the last couple of years. If you look at a graph depicting the supply of new dwellings in Australia, we had a couple of years, 2016, 2017, which were amongst the strongest ever, and it peaked then, and it's fallen away quite a lot since then. So we've had 3 years where we've been building a lot less, and it's one of the reasons why we have such low vacancy rates. Another factor is that investors have been out of the market as a general statement in recent years, not as active as they were, say, 3, 4, 5 years ago, and that's another reason why we haven't had the creation of rental stock. So combination of all those factors mean we don't have enough new dwellings for the demand that we have. I think builders are working really hard to try and keep up, and we don't have enough rental properties, whether new or established. And all of that means a great time to be an investor owner, a great time to be a landlord.
Well, Tom and Hayden, your head office is somewhere down the Gold Coast, so I don't think you ever work too hard, do you?
I just finished up at the beach, and I forgot I had this. So I had to get up, put a shirt on, and get here.
Just on the back of what we.
Sorry, Tom. Just we'll come to that. Just on that. Just while we're talking about this, I think it's fair to note we've got someone logged on and said there's a decent uptake in the home builder program. I know of someone who's a downsizer who's taking advantage of it. And that's really good because previously when we've had these grants, they've been first homeowner grants, right? So this is why this grant is different, because it's like an owner-occupied grant. It's not first homeowner. And so it can be anyone who wants to live in their own home can take advantage of this grant if they build a new property. So I think that's something that's good to note. It's very different from previous grants that have come out. And of course, they can be added to the first homeowner grants, etc. So, Tom, you go on.
Yeah, I was just going on the back of what Terry was saying, where when COVID-19 hit, some of these large developers stopped construction altogether with their stages. So now, when they've come back since the home builder grant's been released, some of we're seeing a massive shortage of land in a lot of the main locations that me and Hayden have sold for the last 5 or 10 years, where land in some of these areas is a year and a half away, because they stopped construction during COVID for 6 months. Now it's even created more, buyers are now missing out. So we're having buyers come to us, especially in the last about 5 weeks. We're having buyers come to us every day, and basically there's nothing to buy. There's no land available. And the land opportunity that's available is a year to a year and a half away. And that's really being snapped up upon release. So I think even if home builder was to go, there's still huge demand for buyers out there trying to buy, because they're just ultimately missing out.
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, I just can't help but think that completely expands upon the problems we're going to see, or the can being kicked down the road in terms of supply. I mean, what Terry was talking about with in previous years, our supply of new properties been dropping, and yet now we have this grant that's come in to stimulate this. And Terry, we've had a discussion offline that I'd read a report in the Australian Financial Review that there was 480,000 expats had returned home from overseas, to reside from during this COVID time. And we I thought that was high, and I know you had your comments and thoughts around that, Terry. But I talked to someone else after that who is a mate in China, and he reckoned there was 800 to 1 million plus expats overseas at any one time. So 480,000 actually begins to sound like a fair figure. Now, if 480,000 expats have come back, right, they're not all they didn't all rent their houses out, right? There could be a husband or a wife working overseas, coming back to the family. I get all that. But let's just halve the number, right? We're down to 220 odd thousand that have come back, or 240,000 in that time period. That's the same or more than a 1 year's annual growth of immigration that normally the whole country has in a 6-month period. And we're all sitting here wondering why we have rental vacancy issues. You got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, we get way too much commentary from economists in our major media. Economists typically aren't real estate experts, and they usually misread the signals. So we've had a lot of commentary to the effect that because overseas migration can't happen at the moment, that's going to have a detrimental impact on real estate markets, and prices will drop. But they haven't looked at the broad picture, and I think the point you're making is that this weight of demand from expats wanting to come back to Australia for all sorts of reasons, but primarily pandemic driven, is actually filling that void. And we're seeing markets like the Sunshine Coast getting a lot of activity from that particular market. Tom and Hayden will probably be in a better position to comment on that than me, but what I'm seeing and hearing is that there's a lot of demand coming from expats overseas into the Gold Coast. I'm also getting feedback from buyers agents in Melbourne. They're also feeling a similar impact. They're getting a lot of business from expats wanting to buy back in Melbourne. So that's become a huge factor in the market, and it's kind of mitigating the negative impacts we might otherwise have had from the turn off of the overseas migration tab.
Yeah, I think that's a good point.
Yeah, and I think the Sunshine Coast you touched on, Terry, is quite simply amazing what's going on there. We've been lucky enough to assist several of our introducer groups into assisting clients up in that particular part of Australia or part of Queensland, and we've seen rental prices or rent per week from houses that were on the market 6 months ago to houses on the market now. There's $60 to $80 difference, and land prices alone in one particular estate, I won't name them, but they've gone from a 375 square metre block for $275 to latest release has that somewhere around $315,000. So you're talking somewhere between $30,000 to $35,000 in land price increase in one particular estate, and the yields are following it. So what rented for $510 12 months ago is now renting for $580 a week. So, I think you touch on it a lot about yields, Scott, and I think as long as those yields can follow the prices, it'll still be attractive for the investors.
Yeah. I've been just recently starting to put out there my prediction that we're coming into a national property boom in Australia, and I know other respected research analysts like Simon Presley from Propertyology are saying similar things. But to a large degree, the boom that I'm predicting is already happening. It's already happening in locations like the Sunshine Coast. The Sunshine Coast is our number one pick at the moment. It has been for the last, 12 to 18 months. Out of all locations in Australia, we think that's our number one, driven by infrastructure spending to a large degree. But it's happening around Australia. Domain in the last couple of days published their quarterly price statistics for Australia, and there was an article they published today based on their quarterly research for the September quarter, saying that the regions are outperforming the capital cities by a wide margin, and there are locations in regional Australia where there's been like 30% increases in median prices in the last 12 months. Well, the Sunshine Coast, the top end of the Sunshine Coast market, is doing that as well. Locations like Sunshine Beach, Minyama, and some others have had 33% increases in their median house prices in the last 12 months. It's not marketing talk. That the stats actually show it. We already have a boom in some of these places, and the Sunshine Coast is one of those places that I think is already booming.
Yeah, well, that's a good point. And Terry, that lines up, obviously, that is reflected in your reports that you're giving out, your national hotspot top 10 and that sort of thing. And two of those locations are actually part of where these fellas build, which is the Sunshine Coast and Moreton Shires.
Yeah.
And that's why we have stock from Pivotal on the Property Hotspot website in Sunshine Coast and Moreton, because they're your hotspot locations. So as builders in those locations, fellas, how have you seen, obviously building everywhere is kind of busy at the moment.
Yeah.
So how much harder is it in a location that Terry's identified as a hotspot versus one that's not?
Yeah, look, absolutely. It's certainly got its challenges. I mean, there's a reason why the numbers are aligning for Moreton Bay and the Sunshine Coast, and both areas are probably, I've got to say, the two hardest areas right now to conduct business, not from actual construction point of view, but securing opportunities, because someone of Terry's stature releases that information about all the infrastructure and all that sort of stuff, and everyone sort of sees it and it makes sense. The yields are there, the infrastructure's there, so you've got, what happens is a long list of people wanting to purchase, which is ultimately going to add more demand to the area, and the supply's just not there. If you look at Harmony Estate in Palmview, you're talking April, May next year, 7-8 months away before a registered block of land becomes available. So the limited supply plus the huge demand is certainly making it very, very difficult to find opportunities. But when you do, I suppose it's about having those purchasers that are ready and understand the opportunity available to them and can act. It sounds like a typical sales pitch. There's only one lot left, and if you don't buy it today, you're going to miss out. But that's unfortunately the reality of it.
And values are
It
supporting
is.
it as well. When we are getting sales in those locations that you guys identify, we don't have valuation, issues at all. It's very well supported as well.
Okay, so let's just expand on that, Tom, because there's some people who might watch and go, "Oh, that's who cares." But do you want to go into just a little bit of detail in that why sometimes in some new locations with building you can have valuation issues, because that will sort of define what you just said?
Yeah, sure. So with valuations, I guess the value is going to look at the comparable sales in the area and base that evidence on what they support the current valuation. So it can be very challenging on a new location or not much infrastructure being spent, or if the property land prices are too high, the valuers will make comment and undervalue those properties. So if they're valuing the properties on the dollar, they're obviously seeing the infrastructure, the land prices are supported, the comparable sales are supported, which is a good indication that it's a very good location to buy in.
And what we find a lot of the time is that particularly when you let's just pick an area, like say Morayfield in Moreton Bay, it's got a heap of infrastructure and whatnot. And it's probably a little bit older in terms of where it's at. It was probably developed 25 to 30 years ago, but new land estates are coming into there. But what Tom means by comparable sales is that the valuers are going to look at, well, what 4-bedroom, 2-bath, 2-car home sold previously. That I can justify this new house and land package on. But the problem you find is that house is 25 years old without modern building, methodologies and all that sort of stuff. So, they sometimes struggle to justify the price because there just isn't anything comparable to work with.
Yeah, okay, that's a good point. So, we've had a question come in here just to ask. It's going back a bit on the first homeowners. So the grant, the $25,000 grant, can it be used as part of the deposit or not?
That one's for you, Tommy.
Yeah, sure. So yes, it can be. It just depends on the type of banks that are actually accepting that. So the Westpac Group has accepted that'll be used as part of their deposit, but not all banks have accepted that yet. So it can definitely be. I guess the best option is go speak to a local broker, and they'll be able to tell you which banks are accepting that or not, and then it depends on your application if it fits their criteria or not. But yes, can be used depending on the bank.
No, that's good. Yep. And if you need a broker, then you can contact us on the details scrolling at the bottom of the screen, and we can put you in touch with someone in your area. Now, one last sort of range of questions I want to discuss is, and Terry, I'll start with you. Where to from here for investors? I think we all agree that investors aren't as active in the market as probably what they should be right now. Okay, so they could be a lot more active and they're not. I also think that we probably agree, let's say, we'll take a show of hands. Do we agree that if we keep seeing things the way we're going, then we're going to have a massive shortage, and what happens is that rental prices are going to increase? I mean, we're seeing that in some areas right now. Okay,
correct.
So if that's the case, then the yields are going to come back for investors. At what point do they get back in the market, Terry? When do we see investors back in?
I don't think investors are staying out of the market because of the level of yields. There's plenty of places they can buy with acceptable yields, particularly in regional Australia and some of our cheaper capital cities as well. The Moreton Bay region, we talked about in the north of Brisbane, provides very acceptable rental yields for investors. It's really the negativity that's been in media. I mean, we started this pandemic period with media forecasting that prices were going to collapse. 10%, 15%, some worst case scenarios 30% or more. And it's made investors very, very nervous. They think that we'll wait it out and we'll wait to see when prices do collapse, then we've got great opportunities to buy cheaply. And of course, here we are 7 or 8 months later and it just hasn't happened. So I think it's time for investors to stop sitting on the fence. It's time to get active because there's opportunities out there that are being missed to buy well in markets where vacancies are very low and rents are rising, so they're going to be getting a good yield in places that have the credentials for long-term growth. So, yeah, stop fence setting, I think, and start taking action. And I think the most important point of all is stop using mainstream media as your research source, because anybody who thinks scanning newspaper headlines as research is misleading themselves. It's actually the antithesis of research. They need to get some good information and maybe talk to people at the coalface, like Hayden and Tom, and people who actually know what's going on at street level, because it's so different. As we've discussed today, what's actually happening out there in most of Australia is so radically different to what we're actually reading in the Australian and the Australian Financial Review and the Sydney Morning Herald every day. They're so Sydney and Melbourne centric that they're ignoring the rest of Australia where all this activity is happening. And as a consequence of that, investors have got this mistaken impression that they're best to be waiting it out, when in actual fact, and the Domain figures that came out this week, they showed that every capital city in Australia in the September quarter had price growth, except Melbourne, which had no change. So we hadn't had any evidence in those figures of any decline in prices in capital city Australia in the last quarter. And then separate batch of figures from them in the same report shows that regional Australia is absolutely pumping. Double-digit growth is the norm in regional Australia, according to that report, up to 30% in many locations, as we discussed. So, yeah. And the final point I would make is that I think that this pandemic period has been the best possible advertisement anyone could get for residential property as an asset class. It has absolutely refused to buckle, and contrary to that, it's actually risen in most places. So, yeah, the time to get off the fence is past, and it's time for people to get active, I think.
No, that's a good point. So, Tom and Hayden, when do you see investors, coming back in droves like that? We see that. I mean, there are times where they come in and every second person you talk to is an investor, right? I mean, so are we going to see that anytime again soon?
It's certainly already started, in my opinion. Like as Terry said, it's not as if they're completely disappeared. Come April, May, they probably were very gun shy, and 99% of our transactions are probably owner occupier based. However, now we're starting to see that sway and swing, albeit not as quickly as we would have thought, given what we're seeing on the ground for us. I mean, Tom and myself have recently purchased ourselves because it's the numbers are stacking up, and it's just a crazy sort of momentum that's happening in the marketplace. But there's certainly what a lot of the indications we see is that it's not first time investors who are, I suppose, getting into the market, but a lot of our intel suggests that it's a second and third time investors who have already bought property, already see how it performs through these sort of times, that are really starting to enter back into the market and seeing that right across, the Southeast Queensland market. And as Terry said, this whole pandemic's been just such an advertisement for the residential property sector, because, as we looked at the mainstream media in March, we should be looking at our prices 40% cheaper, but they're not. If anything, they're going the other way. And Westpac even a couple of weeks ago sort of predicted, Brisbane as a whole to have sort of 20%, growth from 2021 for a couple of years. So there's all that media starting to swing, albeit the mainstream isn't got the doom and gloom headlines as much anymore, and they're starting to now produce positive activity, which I think will affect consumer confidence and market sentiment, which I think will start to flow into the interstate investors again, who are looking at Queensland. And don't forget, Queensland's had the highest net migration for a couple of years now. So on the back of that, there's still people migrating to Queensland from southern states, and even on the back of the regional market, which I know you guys are looking at. I think that's really going to be really interesting market to watch.
Yeah, and anyone can come to Queensland as long as they spend 14 days in a bathtub or something like that. I don't know how it works. So, Tom, before I go to you, I'd agree, Hayden, with what you said. I mean, we're seeing, our more established investors are definitely the ones talking to us at the moment that are looking for, like, okay, what do you got, Scotty? What's happening? Where can I go? I'm like, yeah, okay. I'll see if I can find some grass somewhere. And
that's right.
I'll ring the guys from... I know Tom's looking for something for me at the moment, and every time I'm sure he sees my phone number on his phone, he shudders, and then he sends me a text saying, oh, yeah, I'm busy, I'll call you back.
Yeah, on the phone, I'll be back in 10 minutes.
That's right. So, Tom, you got any comments on investors? What are you seeing from your side of things?
Yeah, just, going on the back of what Hayden said, there's not a better time for them to enter the market. Not only are the yields going up in the locations where me and Hayden have purchased, one of my properties just handed over and it was rented before it was even handed over, and we achieved an extra $40 per week for that property than what I was expecting. But interest rates going down so low, the actual cash flow for a savvy investor that may have 2, 3, or 4 properties, their cash flow is increased by the interest rates going down as well. So there's not a better time for them to actually buy. I think everything's showing signs for them to enter the market and buy more properties.
And don't forget as well, on the back of the responsible lending laws are going to be changing too come early 2020. And what will that bring? Easier access to credit. That does amazing things for the market as well, I'd imagine. But interested in your thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, I think that Tom read my article that went out on the database last Saturday, and he's just parroting that, which said why investors will accept a lower return because it's all based around the interest cost of money. So thanks for that promotion there, Tom. And I'm going to use it as one.
Yeah, that's right. Quite.
That's and watch out for this Saturday's article when I talk to you, which is about my next comment here, which is why I think that house prices will increase based on yield and the fact that we are seeing exactly what the three of you have just said today, that rental prices are increasing. So when our long-term yield average goes back and someone says, okay, let's break it down, $500,000, $500 a week, 5% roughly, right? You're renting that property for $580 a week, that's going to go somewhere. That's just not a higher yield. The long-term yield average dictates that property is sort of by default going to go to like $540,000 in value or something like that. So 580 or whatever it might be. So it's going to have a rental value increase. And so that's what we're seeing. That's what happens with the rents. When rents go up, those long-term averages sort of still sit the same. Terry, we've got a question here, which from someone on Facebook. When you say a national boom, does that include Sydney and Melbourne? And when you say boom, is that double-digit growth for a few years, or what sort of time frame?
Yeah, well, it actually does include Sydney and Melbourne. As I said, I think it's already underway in many parts of Australia, but not currently including Sydney and Melbourne. But I think they're going to get on board with it. One of the reasons why I'm so confident that what's happening in many parts of Australia is going to go national is because we're going to have very clearly an infrastructure-led economic recovery at federal and state level. The federal budget confirms it. State governments are also talking in similar terms. So they're fast-tracking anything they can. They're bringing forward major infrastructure spending as a way to generating economic activity and jobs and to generate economic recovery that way. And in our view, nothing turbocharges property markets the way new spending on infrastructure do. It creates economic activity, it creates jobs, it improves the amenity of places that didn't previously have rail links. The new rail link makes it suddenly more desirable. We've seen it happen on the Sunshine Coast. We keep referring to it, but it's a great example. Infrastructure spending has transformed the Sunshine Coast from a kind of a sleepy tourist town into what I think is now an international city with a major medical precinct that didn't have before, and that's brought new people to the Sunshine Coast. That's what's pumping up the top end of the property market on the Sunshine Coast. So I think that people, I think if you're short of a strategy or a philosophy to follow as property investors, buy property that lies in the path of progress, follow the infrastructure trail, and it's going to be big in Sydney and Melbourne, and it's going to help the recovery in those markets very strongly. But it's also happening around the country in other places, in remote areas as well as the big city areas. So, to answer that question, yes, Sydney and Melbourne will be on board with it very quickly, I think. And when I talk boom, I'm talking double-digit annual growth.
Okay, that's good. And look, I think that nowhere else has that been demonstrated better in terms of the infrastructure was, and a really good case of that was on The Simpsons when Springfield wanted to build a monorail, right? And you saw, the process they went through. What? What's wrong, Terry? Is that not? That's accurate, right?
I do remember that episode of The Simpsons, but I'm just wondering where you're going with this, Scott. But off you go.
Yeah, Well, I just think it was a really good indication. Like, just it's the public domain number one. The Simpsons are there on the screen, and it was really good. If you want to know how infrastructure drives property growth, then watch that episode of Simpsons when they wanted to build a monorail. That's all I'm saying. Not going to go into that here. It's just a side issue.
What Simpsons character would you be, Scott, if you were going to be a Simpsons character?
It'd be Mr. Burns, sure.
I reckon Barney. Barney.
Yeah. The funny thing about Simpsons is we could probably see ourselves in a lot of the characters, and that's quite concerning.
Yeah, that's right.
Definitely Bart. But one of the reasons I like the Moreton Bay region we're referred to is the new university campus there, which is only going to get bigger. We like all kinds of infrastructure in terms of their impact on property markets. New transport infrastructure is very influential. But we particularly like new hospitals and new universities because with some types of infrastructure like a new railway, lots of jobs in creating it, not so many jobs in running it. But with a university campus, there's actually more jobs in running it than there are in building it. So it's got this ongoing impact in terms of jobs creation. But the life and energy that a new university campus injects into a property market like those northern suburbs of Brisbane and the Moreton Bay region is immense. And I think because of the pandemic shutdowns, we haven't seen the full impact of that yet, but in coming years we will do so. And suburbs close to it, like Launton and Petrie and others, are going to get a huge uplift from that.
Yeah, look, Terry, I was... this isn't actually funny. I actually was at Petrie Station yesterday, and I'm going to share this here because I hadn't been down there since they finished, right? And so I got out of the station, and that's literally, you can see the rail line at the bottom, and that's the university campus, right there. I mean, you're talking about infrastructure and things being built around key infrastructure like rail and what have you. This is a classic example right here. I got out off the train and went, oh, someone's put a building there, and it's the USC campus, right? And then across to the left, I didn't take another photo. It's big, heaps of area for them to expand upon. But this is, mate, that's pretty handy. If you want to get there, there's barely walking. You go straight across the overbridge across the rail, and you're at uni. That's pretty handy.
Yeah, and there's lots of other infrastructure right through there. I mean, I love the retail offering up through there. There's the main arterial route that runs up through all those suburbs. Fantastic retail offering. There's lots of schools, and there's great lifestyle elements as well. That exodus to affordable lifestyle isn't just about people leaving the cities and going to the regions. It's also going to some of the outer ring areas of some of our capital cities, like Brisbane, and that Moreton Bay region has got lots of green spaces, recreational lakes, all those elements, plenty of schools. It ticks all the boxes. But that university campus is kind of the game changer.
And one thing, I know we're going a little bit over time here. We'll wrap it up shortly. But Terry, on that topic, you're talking about the exodus to affordable lifestyle. There's some bloke that looks like you wrote an article or was written about in an article. This is in Mackay. So the question was sent to me today, is Mackay on the hotspot location because your face is in their newspaper?
Yeah, well, it's included in we recently published that as one of our new reports. We thought that trend, what we call the exodus to affordable lifestyle, is so significant. I think it's the single biggest trend impacting real estate this century. We're 20 years into the 21st century. Nothing else this big has happened in Australian real estate so far this century. And so we published a new report. There are so many good contenders. We actually published a B list as well because it was very hard to choose just 10. So we also had the B list. But Mackay's definitely there for all sorts of good reasons. And top of the list, Sunshine Coast. Okay, all right. So was Mackay in the A list or the B list? I actually can't remember, to tell you the truth. It's on one of those two lists. But it's not like you do much of writing or anything. I'm sure you remember everything you write, mate. But actually, Mackay features in a number of our reports because it's definitely in our top 5 regional Queensland hotspots report. But I just wanted
that's right. It is too. No, that's good. No, look. I guess what I'm trying to say by this is that what you're talking about with the exodus to affordable lifestyle. I mean, and I know you just said don't read the mainstream news, but when you appear in the mainstream news, I'm sure it's okay to read that. But it's that's where it's hitting now, right? I mean, it's hitting those locations. It is in the newspapers. You don't want to dilly-dally too long after those sort of things start to be in the newspapers, because then it's kind of getting a bit too late. So if you are wanting to work in any of those hotspot locations, you need to know ahead of time. Make sure you buy one of Terry's reports, because when it's in something like the Daily Mercury for Mackay, then you're probably getting a little bit long in the tooth for the information.
Yeah. I wouldn't call the Mackay Mercury mainstream media either. Local media tends to be a little bit more realistic in their reporting than the big city newspapers, which are just relentlessly negative, because that's the mentality. It's all about clickbait headlines, isn't it? And they think that a negative sensationalist headline will induce people to click on that headline more than something that's positive or actually accurate. The truth is optional a lot of the time, and people as consumers probably need to be aware of that, because what they think they're accessing good information because it's in a big paper, but in actual fact, quite often it's the opposite.
Yeah, no, that's well, that's probably a topic for another day, Terry, because we really wouldn't have enough time to cover that today. So let's not get into that rabbit hole.
Don't get me started on that one.
Don't get him started.
All right. Well, look, I wanted to touch on a couple of things very, very quickly as we close off. We're going to have final comments shortly, but I did want to remind everyone of our website, propertyhotspot.com.au, which is the website that is created to bring people all together in one good location to buy new property in these hotspot locations, right? So that's something that you need to have a look at. If you want to go and have a look at that, you can. That is at www.propertyhotspot.com.au. And propertyhotspot.com.au uses all the amazing intellectual data from hotspotting and Terry Ryder's own desk. And we only supply properties in the hotspot locations. And of course, in those locations, our panel partners, the building panel partners are working, and guys like Pivotal Homes with Tom and Hayden are working in those locations to get brand new properties built and constructed for our partners. There can be homeowners, can be investors, doesn't matter to us, as long as they're in a hotspot location that Terry has said, okay, let's go Joe on. And just to make sure, there's another guy that looks like you, Terry. There's these guys that look like you popping up all over the place.
Well, it's the hairstyle. I made it famous. Now everybody wants to copy it.
Well, look, you're a trendsetter ahead of time. That's for certain. So if you want more information on anything we've discussed today, make sure you hit us up, and I'll go through that shortly. But before we do, final thoughts. Let's start with you, Tom.
I think final thoughts for me would be, well, we're coming to the end of the year. Home builders may be extended or not. We're still not sure. It could come into play later on in the year. If you're a first home buyer or occupier wanting to take advantage of that, I'd be very quick. Where obviously locations are running out of land down near the Gold Coast here. We've got some suburbs, that just have no land at all for the next 12 months. So that's not going to qualify. And that's like in a lot of the hotspot areas as well. So if you're looking to buy, get in straight away and just having the finance ready, chat to a broker first, because if you do put a contract down, the developers aren't going to give you, long extensions or timelines with that, because they obviously have a pipeline of clients. So just have finance ready and get in soon.
No, good stuff. All right, Hayden.
Yeah, look, much along the same lines. I think, speak to someone like yourself, speak to someone like Terry, get a good understanding at very least, become educated in relation to what's actually happening in the Australian residential property market, because it isn't dropping, it's going the other way. And as Tom said, it's an unprecedented time as a first home buyer or owner occupier to get involved in the marketplace. So this will likely never be repeated in our lifetime. So when people are giving money away to you to do it, and if you have the opportunity to do it, I certainly would be. And as an investor, It's property economics 101, supply versus demand. There is so much demand out there for new housing, and both in the rental pool and the purchasing pool. So if you want a piece of the action, I'd be certainly get in contact with a trusted advisor like Scott and Terry to look at your options and get in before you miss the boat, so you're not paying overs.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And Terry, what do you think? Final thoughts, and while you're doing that, just before we do that, Terry, looks like we've got a topic for our next show on mainstream media that Murdoch News is the best source. So we'll hold that comment over to our next show. What do you reckon?
Yeah, again, don't get me started.
Yeah, that's what I mean. So, final thoughts on our topic today, where our Zoolander topic of building is just so hot right now.
Yeah, look, I think my final thought is that it's time for investors to stop fence sitting and get active. Owner-occupied buyers, including first-home buyers, are very active, and investors are missing opportunity. Unfortunately, most investors are herd animals. They'll start getting interested in diving into the market when they read in the newspaper that there's a boom happening, but by then it'll be too late. They will have missed the best opportunities. No one ever got rich following the herd. Most of the people have been very successful with property investment are the ones who detach from the herd and run in the opposite direction often, or at least lead the pack. Don't be one of those who buys 1 year into a boom. The ideal time to buy is before it starts. You need to get active now.
Yep, I couldn't agree more, and that's the whole reason why you created hotspotting, was to try and identify those areas that are prone to growth or primed for growth ahead of time. And your reports are very affordable and do a great job of identifying that, right?
Certainly.
Yeah. So all right. So we're going to do some closing comments here for those of you who are listening online on the Xenium Live podcast. Okay, so if you want to contact anyone here today, we've got Pivotal Homes and Terry Ryder from Hotspotting, then you can do so via us. You can just go to www.xenium.live and to log onto the site there, or better yet, send us an email, hello@xenium.live. So that's HELLO@xenium.live. No .coms, no .aus, just xenium.live. That is all you need to type in. You can call us on 1300 66 7789. And of course, if you've been watching, that's been scrolling at the bottom of the screen the whole time. Also, a couple other things. There's a great podcast kicking around, and yes, I know I'm very, very biased on that reason, but that was because I did it with the Pivotal Boys.
There he is.
about 5 weeks ago. And where can they find that podcast, Hayden?
Mate, YouTube, Spotify. It's called Everything Property by Pivotal Homes. So YouTube and Spotify, and they're the two main sources to watch that one, particularly your episode, mate.
Particularly my episode. Yeah, right. Okay, sure. No worries. Yeah. You learn
something new every day. You open me up. Yeah, that's right. You were there for the comedic value, mate. I think
that was it, mate. You had to ad lib. Thankfully, it was not a filmed thing. It was just an audio thing, and you could just put someone else in actually saying something decent when I was there. So,
right.
All right. Well, that's good. Well, look, thank you all very much for joining us today. I really appreciate it. I hope you've had a good time. I mean, it's always a good time when Terry Ryder's involved, don't you think, fellas?
Absolutely.
Sure.
Yeah, he's the life of the party, young Terry.
Answer.
Correct answer. All right, we all passed.
That's right.
All right, look, that's it from us. Thanks, Tom and Hayden from Pivotal Homes, for joining us today. Thank you very much, Terry Ryder from hotspotting.com.au. You always bring a wealth of knowledge and an awesome hairstyle to the show. I very much appreciate it. And we'll see you next time. If you want to know anything more about anything we've said today, as I said, hit us up on the details that are scrolling at the bottom of the screen below, and we'll be more than happy to put you in touch with the right people. If you do want a broker and you're wanting to look at property, then make sure you talk to us first. We can put you in touch with brokers in your area and get people that are right for you in our network. Also, don't forget to log on to propertyhotspot.com.au if you want, and click on the property section, and in there is stock from Pivotal Homes, where Tom and Hayden have pieced together using Terry's data in those ripe hotspot locations and stock that's ready to rock and roll. And it's very, very, look, honestly, we have to keep changing it all the time because it's just disappearing out of there. And that does sound like a sales pitch. It's annoying. I wouldn't be saying if it wasn't. It's not a sales pitch. It annoys me that I've got to keep updating the website because I'm a lazy so-and-so, but that's how it works. And that is what's going on in the market at the moment. All right. That is enough from us today. We'll have another Zenium show next Thursday when PJ's back on. And it is all about the election that stops the globe. And we'll have some sort of, stock market responses from PJ at that time. So keep an eye out for that link that'll be following after this one, coming shortly. Thanks to our guests today. And you have been listening to All Things Money, Finance and Property. And I'm your host, Scotty North, and this is Zenium Live.